So this session will be recorded and we will have this session uploaded onto Marathi Kalamandal's YouTube channel. So please subscribe to those channel as well. So you will get notification once this session gets uploaded to the MKM YouTube channel or Marathi Kalamandal YouTube channel. So now I pass on the control to Ramesh Deshpande to introduce Dr. Deshmukh.
Welcome, friends. Uh, I had to introduce Dr. Deshmukh in English because there are a lot of non-Marathi speaking people in the audience. So it is indeed a privilege to have Dr. Vinod Deshmukh amongst us this evening to speak to us. It is also a privilege for me to get a chance to introduce Dr. Deshmukh. It is not easy to adequately and appropriately introduce Dr. Deshmukh, given his outstanding accomplishments in both professional and personal life, particularly in challenging areas of neuroscience or neurology on the one hand, and yoga, philosophy, and practice, including meditation on the other. Both have close connections to body, brain, and mind. Growing up in a family in a village near Nagpur in Maharashtra, India, where reading books on Hindu philosophy and mythology in the presence of his learned father was a daily routine, Dr. Deshmukh received an early introduction to yoga. Even as a high school student, he had an ambition, which in his own words read as follows: I want to meet myself. I want to know myself. This is the theme. Actually, this is the theme of today's presentation. I want to meet myself. I want to know myself. To understand self has indeed been his lifelong journey, and he will shortly talk about where he is today on this front. Without going into details of his formal resume as MD, PhD, as an associate professor of neurology at the University of Florida's College of Medicine, or as a private solo practitioner of neurology at the Flagler Hospital at St. Augustine in Florida, it is remarkable to note that since his retirement in 2007, Dr. Deshmukh has found time and energy to give about 30 invited lectures or talks on brain, mind, yoga, and meditation at prestigious conferences in different parts of the world. It's important to mention his last two talks. These were at International Conference on Yoga and Neurosciences, Traditions and Research Approaches called Yantra 2020, that was convened in June 2020 by Bengaluru West National Institute of Mental Health and Neuroscience. And the other one, also equally important, was in October 2020 at the international conference convened by the Government of India at the initiative of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, called Vaibhav, or Vaishvik Bharatiya Vaijnanik Summit, in which leading scientists of Indian origin from around the world participated to explore a futuristic agenda for India for research and development in diverse disciplines, including neuroscience and yoga. And Dr. Deshmukh was an important resource person there. Over the years, Dr. Deshmukh has published over 60 scientific articles, including a monograph on brain blood flow. His recently published articles are on such topics as neuroscience of meditation, multi-stream self, turiya, the fourth state of consciousness, prana, dhyana, Vedic psychology as a science of wisdom, and the cognitive pause and unload, the CPU hypothesis of meditation and creativity. His recent scientific book, The Astonishing Brain and Holistic Consciousness, Neuroscience and Vedanta Perspectives, was published in 2012. This book provides an understanding of holistic consciousness with a focus on neuroscience and Vedanta perspectives. Holistic consciousness is an all-inclusive awareness of the currently situated body, mind, being of an individual person or a living organism. Last but not the least, Dr. Deshmukh's hobbies have a spiritual, a yogic context, which is superbly reflected in his nature photography. And you see one of the pictures he has taken just on the first slide, oil paintings and nature talk. He has published books on his original poetry, essays, and photographs. Much of this work is freely available on the web. See his website, which is poetsmiles.com. com. I think we can communicate that separate. That said, Dr. Deshmukh, we are also excited to listen to your experiments and experience with searching yourself through the years of scientific learning and research in yoga, philosophy, and practice, especially meditation. This particular event cannot be more timely in the context of COVID-19 crisis, which has made yoga and yogic way of life a lot more relevant to protect one's health, both physical and mental. That said, Dr. Deshmukh, the floor is yours. Please start. Thank you.
Ramesh, thank you so much for this very generous introduction. And I want to welcome each and every one of you for this program, which I will try to make very interesting, trying to cover both these very deep subjects, yoga as well as neuroscience. In this first slide, as you see this beautiful waterfall from Yosemite, the natural reality is very dynamic and fluid. And we need to understand that. And that natural reality include our own body, mind, and sense of being. This photograph I took on the second night of Bhaubij, or so it was a beautiful evening, and I took this from our dock on the St. John's River. So we are all nested in nature, and nature is our home. We are to love life, nature, and humanity, and learn to be peaceful at oneself and others. So happy Bhaubij and happy Thanksgiving to all of you. My perspective is basically neurobiological because I love neuroscience. I also love yoga, and I try to understand what is described in Yoga Shastra or science of yoga in terms of neuroscience and neurobiology. My book, The Astonishing Brain and Holistic Consciousness, was an attempt to integrate neuroscience and Vedanta, the two very profound perspectives, which you will see that I can understand in my own life and being and express it, as you will see from this following slides. Believe it or not, each one of us has gone through these stages of human development, starting from day one, which is just a dot, one little dot. That was the day one was, till the embryo grows. This was like 1 month, and this is like 2 months. Each one of us has gone through these stages of human development. That is our neurobiology, that is foundational. Nobody can deny that. I need to reduce this, I guess. Yeah. Okay. I can also move this here. Now, in this, you can see that we also have a long history of evolution. We have the genetic history, the genes from all living organisms, including sponges, jellyfish, starfish, sharks, amphibians, birds, rodents, macaques, and finally human beings. And what has been traced in the brains of all these animals is there is a progressive evolution of different functions or faculties in terms of controlling intake of food, air, water, withdrawal reflexes, either approach or avoid reflexes, bilateral functional symmetry, and hypothalamic control, which hypothalamus is the structure that controls the overall bodily function, including autonomic nervous system, temperature regulation, hormones, all that. And then development of conscious life in terms of development of paired eyes, directing and focusing of attention, exploration and exploitation, terrestrial locomotion, action perception mapping the land you are walking on or the environment you are in, and your own body that is walking the way it is walking. All this is mapped from moment to moment. That is our map of experience or experiential map. And then expansion of frontal, parietal, and temporal lobes, development of memory, different types of memory, like short-term memory, working memory, which is just lasts for 20 seconds or so, and then intermediate memory, which can last for minutes or hours, and then long-term memory, which can last all your life, lifelong memory. Then development of memory and speech and mind, communication. And then initially, there is self-defensive posture. Everybody is trying to defend himself in the environment that one finds in. But hopefully we can grow to be all caring, caring for others, and not be fearful, not be afraid of our being in nature. So we need to be guided by the life of insight, equanimity, and universal friendship. Now, at one time in neuroscience, organisms, living beings, including human beings, were considered as machines, as automatic machines, automatons. You put a stimulus, something happens in that black box, something comes out, or stimulus response model, so-called behaviorism. But now people are realizing that is not realistic. That is not true. Every living organism has a body. It has a behavior that is controlled. It has a purpose in life. It has memory, history. It has a sense of agency. So even the animals like cats and every animal has a sense of agency or being. For instance, even an animal, unicellular animal like amoeba, which has no formal brain as such, but if you poke a needle to it, it will withdraw by itself automatically. So every animal has a sense of being, which it tries to protect and then grow and flourish. Our human sense of being depends on, of course, not only the input from outside the world, but also the input from inside the body, including proprioception, interoception, vestibular input, and the memory of the body. So we continuously map ourselves in terms of our own body and the surroundings. Our cognitive space, or this self and surrounding space-time, is divided into personal space, peripersonal space. Peripersonal means surrounding environment, and then extrapersonal space or space that is far away from us, that we see like the trees and the stars and the sun and the galaxies. All that is far space or extrapersonal space. But all this experiential space-time is integrated and is managed by each individual in his own experience, in his own life, which is fascinating. So let me briefly start with my own journey, which is kind of interesting that in 1955, when I graduated from high school, one of my friends asked me, "What is your ambition in life? What do you want to become?" I said, "Mala mala bheta se." That means I want to meet myself. I want to know myself. I want to realize myself. And this has been my lifelong journey to self, myself. So I'm now, from here to here is the journey. From now to now is the journey. Here I am, appreciating the wonder of this wonderful life with feeling of aliveness, awakeness, awareness, wellness, and overall happiness. This is an amazing life full of beauty, bounty, and bliss. My first book is called Presence, the Key to Mental Excellence. It was inspired by nature, and it also includes the translation of Patanjali's Yoga-Sutra. The cover of this book was designed by me. I created a format or montage in which you see the biophysical aspect of the human body, the brain, and in the left-hand corner you see symbolic I, which is the meta-awareness or the non-dual awareness, which is the Sakshi Bhav or the witness consciousness. Since then, I have published several books: The Last Sleep, Poet's Walk, Poet's Vision, Astonishing Brain and Holistic Consciousness, Natural Bliss, and Now and Beyond. All of these were inspired by nature. I keep a journal. I've been keeping a journal from 1980. So last 40 years, whenever I get some new idea for thoughts or poems or stories, whatever it is, plus photography and painting. So all of those are shown in these books. In the last book, Now and Beyond, also contains several paintings by my beloved wife Sunanda. She is very fond of painting and does excellent portrait painting. My first neuroscience presentation was in 1982 to the Society of Neuroscience. And I proposed a model of human attention as two modes of attention. One mode is based on memory, what I call the mnemonic mode, which we all experience and which we all go from here to there with complete sense of duality, that I am this and this object is that. That dualistic life is based on memory and imagination, recollection, etc. The second mode, which is a new mode, is called the presence mode, which is complete present mindedness. Now, in this full present mindedness, one is so completely engrossed in the present reality that there is no separation, there is no duality as such, which is like the non dual awareness. We'll talk about it more. One sort of forgets oneself and is completely immersed in the experience of, for instance, in nature or painting or writing or meditating, whatever state you are in. It's a beautiful state. This is a beautiful photograph that I was lucky to take on St. John's River. The sun was setting, and you can see the boat coming across the beam of light, and the two people sitting and having a conversation in the boat. I was lucky to catch that perfect moment. So, this is a moment of conversation between two people and with synchrony, in synchrony with nature. Interestingly, Patanjali's Yoga Sutra is a very important historical text. Believe it or not, I have 14 translations of Patanjali's Yoga Sutra in my library. And I have read each and every one of them. And of course, one translation is mine in 1990. One of the interesting thing about some of these original Sanskrit texts is that they are very concise, because when they were discovered and taught to the students, there was no writing as such. There was no paper and pencil. So these statements were passed from teacher to student, and mainly by remembering and reciting these shlokas every day. So they are very concise, to the point, and they try to summarize the message right at the beginning in the first statement. Like this one, Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha, the, the restraint of the modifications of the mind is yoga. That's the definition of yoga. It's, in modern terms, it is the natural control or regulation of the wandering mind to a very calm and composed and orderly state of mind and being. Tada drashtu swarupe avasthanam. Then the seer abides in its own nature. That means when the mind is so calm and composed, still, silent, and serene, then the original self or the authentic self or the original being appears to itself, or it reveals itself to the person in that state. The person has to do nothing as such. It's an effortless state. It just dawns on you. It is an insight. It is an intuition. One of the Sanskrit term for that is abhijnana. In Kashmiri Shaivism, it is called abhijnana. That means it's like the recognition of yourself by yourself. But it's a profound experience when you notice it the first time. Vritti sarupyam itaratra. That means other times we are dominated by our thoughts, the wandering mind, and the emotions. One of the short statement I had made in like a haiku, that body ages, mind wanders, the ego wishes or desires, I'm here, ever fresh, ever new. Now, how do we achieve this such a calm and composed and still completely alert, attentive state? So, in yoga, it's called Abhyasa Vairagya. Vairagya means to letting go. You have to let go. It's not something that you do something new. It's not something that you create a new state of being. It's already there. That is your foundational nature, foundational being, foundational self. You just have to uncover it. You have to uncloud it. You have to get rid of the superficial surface activity that is going on in your mind. And when that clears up, when the dust settles down, when the water settles down, then you see the calm and clear bottom of the ocean. It happened to me once when we were scuba diving. The whole family learned to scuba dive in Florida Keys. And we were at a uh, about 18 or 20 feet deep uh, coral reef area. And I slowly went down and down and down. We had to use the weight to go down till my feet touched the ground. It was an amazing experience. In the beginning, you are so afraid of going under the ocean. But once you start going down, have the courage and go down and down and down without knowing what it is like. When you touch the feet on the ground, it was exhilarating. It was beautiful because I could see the whole ocean above, the surface, and all the boats and other people above me. The same thing happens when you reach the ground state of your own being. You see the superficiality of your own mind, thoughts, emotions, memories, everything. And there is nothing beyond that. That is the ultimate reality or the essential reality or the ground state or the original mind. Yoga Sutra also tells you that this experience can happen without any belief system. You don't need to believe in anything. You don't need to believe in a God or a person or a personified being. But at the same time, you have that option. Whether you personify the divine nature into a human being or a human-like being, either male or female, that's up to you. That's your option. Another term some of the neuroscientists are very active, especially in the Buddhist literature. And mindfulness is a big buzzword nowadays in neuroscience. As soon as you say mindfulness stress reduction program, your grants are granted. If you say yoga, then people are hesitant. Somehow there is this bias about mindfulness and yogic meditation. Hopefully it will slowly change as we develop more research. But some of these neuroscientists are taking terms from Buddhist literature. For instance, mindfulness means smruti or sati. Smruti means memory or reminder, and sati is the Pali word. Similarly, sampradnya means meta-awareness, awareness of conscious contents or mental contents. Now they are coming with a term called mindfulness meta-awareness. They are trying to come up with new English terms to describe what was historically described in Buddhism and Hinduism and Vedanta, which is fine, but you have to understand the meaning of it and hopefully have your own personal experience to really know what it is like to be in that state of non-dual awareness. In both Buddhism and Hinduism and yoga, the ideal is to become godlike or godliness, to develop some positive qualities. And the four major positive qualities are Maitri means friendliness, Karuna means compassion, Mudita means cheerfulness, delight, and Upeksha means equanimity or composure. When you have such outstanding positive qualities and a positive mindset, you also have a great potential to know anything, to be fully present every moment, to have insight, understanding, and learning from moment to moment, and have infinite potential. That's what one of the definition of God is: omnipresence, omniscience, and omnipotent. Adi Shankaracharya also described this quite clearly. One of his final statement in Nirvana Shatkam, which is like 6 stanzas, 6 verses of absolute freedom. And he says, I am changeless, formless, forever the same, and being all pervasive, I am omnipresent. I am beyond freedom and attachment to the senses. I am the soul of wisdom and bliss. I am Shiva, I am Shiva. Now, this positive psychology is another whole different new field now, so-called in Western neuropsychology, and is being recommended, of course, by major institutions like Harvard Medical School for all medical students as well as educational institutions. And it's a good thing. And it, of course, proposes self-development, effortlessness, self-freedom, and the positive values, and freedom from negative feelings like anger, fear, hatred, all those. Now, the actual process of meditation in Ashtanga Yoga, Ashtanga means 8 steps, 8 steps of yoga, in which the first 5 steps are like external, like certain rules of behavior, rules of conduct, taking personal care, personal cleanliness, social behavior. Then how to sit silent, still for a period of time, then how to breathe effortlessly, clearly, and then how to let go things from your wandering mind. And then lastly, there are three steps which are called antaranga, or the internal steps of meditation, which is dharana, dhyan, and samadhi. Dharana means concentration, to focus on something, to focus on a beautiful tree, or a beautiful flower, or a beautiful bird, or whatever you are interested in, to focus on it fully, wholeheartedly. Then dhyana means to dwell on it, to continue to focus on it, not just few seconds, but for several minutes or even longer. And then samadhi means you are so completely engrossed in that process that you forget yourself. Swarupa Shunya you, as if you don't even exist as a separate entity, as a separate being. That has been described, of course, as the flow state. Now, in flow state, it can happen in many activities, including sports, painting, photography, nature walk, dancing, performance, any kind of creative artistic activity. One gets so completely engrossed in it that one can forget oneself as a separate, isolated individual. So, Swarupa Shunya you, as if I'm not there, totally immersed. And then the activity becomes effortless. In my translation, the last few aspects of Yoga Sutra, I said, I described the random thoughts and emotions of a wandering mind. Then I talk about unclouded presence, having entirely overcome the desire, even for the highest meditative experience, and continuing to be intensely alert, absolute unclouded presence or present mindedness with complete mental clarity dawns upon us. Self fulfillment, thus having fulfilled ourselves completely, the sequential process of personal mental change comes to an end. The so called working memory is not necessary anymore because each moment is beautiful and perfect in itself, and you can dwell on it, you can pause in it. In my book, one of my statements was Sare Kshan Sarkets. From that vantage point of view, every moment is the same. As when you stand at the very source of your being, at the original ground of your being, all changes are the same. Whether the cloud is here or the tree is there or the moon is there, it doesn't matter. You are still completely fulfilled within yourself and have a sense of bliss, fullness, completeness at each moment. And in such a state, the life fulfills itself, being free of any selfish motivations, instinctual pressures, mental conflicts. We live naturally, fully, freely, and attentively, always from the spontaneous conscious matrix, expressing the natural wisdom. I want to share some of the Vedic and Upanishadic insight because the roots of yoga is in Vedas and Upanishads. It started there. And Upanishads are great sources, one of the oldest books in the history of mankind. And they are my favorites. I used to read and recite them when I was growing up, and my father was very fond of them. In this short Upanishad, with only three stanzas, it describes Bhayatma or the external body, Antaratma or internal mind, and Paramatma or the transcendent being. So these rishis or these enlightened sages, they knew about self-transcendence or going beyond one's limited ego, going beyond one's thoughts, minds, memory, and limited ego. If you read these descriptions, they had the actual experience of non-dual awareness and non-dual being, which they call Turiya, the fourth state of consciousness. Ishavasya Upanishad, this is another beautiful statement that the self is one, unmoving. It is faster than the mind. Having preceded the mind, it is beyond the reach of senses. Ever steady, it outstrips all that run. By its mere presence, it enables the cosmic energy to sustain the activities of all living beings. Matarishva means cosmic energy or energy of Mother Nature. This next shloka is one of my favorites. It has a rhyme, Sanskrit rhyming. I used to recite that. My father taught me that. It talks about the Great Spirit or the spiritual energy or the cosmic energy or the energy of Mother Nature. Tadejati tannejati taddure tadvantike tadantarasya sarvasya tadu sarvasyasya bahyata. It moves and it not. It is far and it is near. It is within all this and it is also outside all this. So, what we experience depends on our own perspective. But the absolute reality, the absolute truth remains the same. The universal being, the cosmic energy remains the same. In Kashmir Shaivism, there are some beautiful books, and this quotation is from Shiva Sutra. The very first statement is Chaitanya Mahatma. This fundamental original awareness, consciousness, is Atman, is the sense of being, is the original being, the primal being. Holistic, blissful, self-effulgent, self-sentient, self-integrated, non-dual conscious being is perfection in itself. It is Atman Brahman. Swapyayat is a statement from Brahma Sutra. Brahma Sutra again is very short statements in Sanskrit, but it has profound meaning. It describes the state of mergence of the individual ego into the universal self or the universal being. The individual into his own self, which of course the Atman is Brahman itself. So this holistic arousal being has two forms of energy. Even in terms of modern neuroscience, there is the homeostatic metabolic energy, which is based on ATP molecule, and there is the neuroelectromolecular energy, which we are realizing now. There is the electromagnetic energy with all different forms, the light, the sound, the touch, the heat, various forms of electromagnetic energy influences all living beings. And the living being cannot be separate from this energy. So the capacity for doing work belongs to the person who has that capacity. And this is the statement in Subodha Panchadashi. Interestingly, this foundational energy, life force, or whatever holistic energy is multidimensional. It's not just mechanical, it's not just electrical, it's not just sound energy, it's not just chemical energy, but all these different forms of energy, and they are integrated, they work together as a single entity. And that's why it becomes such a big puzzle until you experience it in your own being. in your own living body, mind, and self. That this profound sense of energy awareness being with profound wellness, stillness, silence, and serenity is incredible. And that's why it can't be described. It is the most integrated energy that there is. In Panchadashi, it described the wind has vibrational sound energy, a rock has potential energy of inertia, water has energy of fluidity, fire has heat energy, sky has the energy of empty space, destruction and creation has transformative energy, dissipative energy. And just as the embryo of even a huge python is contained in a tiny egg, the whole experiential world is contained within me, the Atman. Just as a tiny seed potentially contains a giant fig tree with fruits, leaves, vines, flowers, branches, and roots, similarly, all of this existence is contained in Brahman, Atman, which is essentially my own true nature, my true being. Phenomenal perspective. In this, Adi Shankaracharya also described Antar Jyotihi Bahir Jyotihi Pratyak Jyotihi Parat Paraha Jyotir Jyotihi Swayam Jyotihi Atma Jyotihi Shivosmiham. So he also says that I am the intrinsic energy, the extrinsic energy, the existential energy, the transcendental energy. I am the energy of energy, the self-effulgent energy, the self energy. I am the Lord Shiva, the God of absolute auspiciousness and perfect goodness. You know, it's very interesting to see this perspective of holistic energy. And in Western neuroscience, people have grappled with this concept of life energy or conscious energy. Sigmund Freud tried to deal with psychical energy, but he gave up his attempt on that. He just mentioned it psychical energy, mental energy, but didn't pursue it further. He went more into the subconscious and unconscious. Wilder Penfield also talks about energy in the sense till his death. He said that it is the energy in the brain that activates the mind, which we then experience. So, energy is very foundational, and we'll come to that more about Penfield's work and his legacy. There is a lot of similarity between Buddhism and Vedanta or Hinduism. Insight and equanimity in Buddhism and Vedanta. Buddha emphasized the practical problems in daily life, like anitya, anatma, and dukkha. Anitya means everything, all our experience is transient, uncertain, unpredictable. Anatma means there is no such thing as a permanent being or permanent self or lasting self. And dukkha means suffering is common to almost everybody, every living being. But, but then he talks about 8 different steps to overcome this dukkha or suffering and finally reach a state of self-freedom, freedom from all these, what he calls nirvana, with all the positive feelings we talked about, like Maitri, Karuna, Upeksha, and Mudita. In Vedanta, it is slightly different perspective in the sense that we assume that there is a Nitya Atma Sukhi Atma within our own being. But it shouldn't be just the words. It shouldn't be just on the surface. It should be something that you actually experience within your own being. One of the statements is Brahmavid Brahmaiva Bhavati, Atmavid Atmaiva Bhavati. To really understand yourself, you have to become yourself authentically, wholeheartedly, fully. Then you know what it is like to be yourself. Like there is a famous book, What It Is Like to Be a Bat, what it is like to be a cat. Each living being has a different feeling of its own being. So as human beings, we have to become authentic human beings and to realize what our true nature is, what our deepest original feeling of existence is, that pure I amness, that pure sense of energy, awareness, being is profound. And of course, Sri Krishna in Bhagavad Gita talks about Sthita Prajna. Sthita Prajna means a man of equanimity and wisdom. And one of the statement is Atmani eva Atmana tushtaha. Such a person is completely content and satisfied and happy within himself for no particular reason, because joy and happiness is natural state, natural being. If you are not happy, then there is a problem. That's not normal. Even in so-called modern mental health, it's very hard to define what is normal mind. If you look up the dictionaries on all normal mind, normal mental health, it's very difficult to define. But it is being intrinsically happy, peaceful, at ease with oneself, and at home in your environment, in your surroundings. Santa Jnaneshwar, one of my favorite OV or statement is Ata Atma Prabha Neech Navi, Techi Karoni Thana Divi, Jo Indriya Te Soruni Jevi, Tayasi Chifave. Atma Prabha means this self luminance, this inner light, this pilot flame within your own innermost being, which, or the fountain within your own being, which self effulges and takes the form of mind, ego, memory, and all the expressions. And it's always new, ever fresh. It's like a timeless, endless spring. So we need to realize that we are not 8-year-old or 5-year-old or 10-year-old. In fact, we are born from moment to moment, consciously. Each conscious moment is a fresh moment. If you understand the neuroscience, the arousal, awareness, being, and attention and awareness is created spontaneously from the brainstem reticular activating system, which I'll come to that, and activate the cortex and the whole living body from moment to moment, from every breath, every heartbeat. It's incredible. It's a great wonder. Another of my favorite from Naneshwar in his book on Amrutanubha. Amrutanubha means experience of the nectar, such a peaceful and beautiful state of love. And he says, this profound, peaceful silence, my verbal silence is the silence of silence. It is so imperturbable that it is like the calm surface of water, where drawing a fish on it leaves no trace, mark, or impression. Manoni maji vaikhari, mauna se hi mauna kari, he paniyavari makari rekiliya. That's a udaran. I'll show you that example. Another point I want to make here is what we experience depends on our self perspective. If you think you are this physical body and nothing else, then you have a very limited perspective and you live from one stressful event to another stressful event. This is a Sanskrit shloka which Sri Hanumana addresses to Sri Rama, the god Rama. And he says, Deha bhavena dasosmi, jiva bhave tvadamshakaha, atma bhave tvamevaham itime nishchita madihi. When I think of myself as the physical body, I am your servant. When I think of myself as a living being, I am a part of you, a small part of you. But when I think of myself as the Atman, then I am you. There is no difference between you and me. And that feeling of oneness or unity has has to dawn on us when we prepare ourselves from that self-realization. See, this is the watermark of a manatee. I was at our dock on the St. John's River in Jacksonville, Florida. And you see the mark. This is the head and the body of the manatee. And the manatee is about 12 to 14 feet big, like the elephant, water elephant. And it's amazing. Once you see this, you know absolutely certain that this is manatee and nothing else. So, and we have seen manatees, unfortunately, less frequently nowadays, but we do see them, which is a great pleasure to see them roaming around in the water freely. Now I want to go into the neuroscience perspective, a complex neural network. And there are multiple levels of organization, but I'll try to simplify it and not make it too technical. I want to look at these pictures for a few seconds. In the picture in the left-hand corner, some of you may see a young girl and some of you may see an old woman. I hope you can see both. Of course, you cannot see both at the same time. You have to switch your perspective to one or the other. But it's fascinating. I will give you a hint that when you see her as a young woman, this area becomes her ear. When you see her as an old woman, this area becomes her eye. It's fascinating. Another, this picture is the ambiguous figure of background and foreground. You will notice that there are several horses in this background. But as you look closely, then you will see, I think there are at least 5 or 6 horses in that, against that background, which almost merges in the background. The phenomenological experience and self-perspective has been described as 3 aspects of self: the narrative self or the autobiographical self, experiential phenomenological self, and the experiential inactive self. And our body, mind, and ego and being are embedded in nature. We are in nature and nature is in us. This is the body, mind, and ego and the sense of I, and the nature and the environment. And we need to feel authentically embodied and embedded in nature and be at peace with our own body and with our own mind, with our mind, our intentionality, our sense of self, and also our environment and nature. This is a complex figure, but I'll simplify it. Self can be looked as subject, object, or the experiential being. All the midline structures, these blue areas, are parts of the perceptive self. The green areas are the cognitive self, and the red areas are the emotional self. These are more like networks that are interconnected, but they participate in different aspects of this self processing. In this black box of mind, I just want to show you in the sense that mind, interestingly, is viewed and defined very differently in the Western neuroscience and in the Eastern philosophy. In the Western neuroscience, mind includes everything, including psyche, conation, cognition, affection, psychic energy, psychic being, sense of self, everything is included in mind. But in Eastern Vedanta and yogic literature, mind has a limited meaning. It means it's an internal instrument and it has only four aspects: mana, buddhi, ahankar, and chitta. Mana means the vichar chakra or the cognitive activity. Buddhi is the intelligence. Ahankar is the ego, sense of intentionality, ego, and agency. And chitta is memory, storehouse of memory. So all these, so we as self act through this black box of mind with the world or the jagat or energy, matter, information. We can also look at ourselves and our body, mind, and ego and self as a two organizer system. This is an oil painting that I did in 2015, oil on canvas. And it's a beautiful, simple human being sitting in meditative posture and being at ease with himself or herself. And there are two centers or sources of energy. The primary energy comes from the subcortex or the brainstem reticular activating system, and the secondary energy comes from the cortex and the cortical activity. You can also divide this system into two organizer systems like conscious, subconscious, cortical, subcortical, top down, bottom up, intentional, automatic, differentiate, integrate, explicit, implicit, self, other, individual, and universal. But we need to promote curiosity, creativity, various arts, paintings, poetry, music, and different sciences in our education and health systems. Unfortunately, modern man is dominated by words, speech, thoughts, symbols. So he's very left hemispheric dominated and constantly talking narrative, constantly being on the cell phone or in front of TV. So no wonder his mind is full of words and sometimes meaningless words. They just repeat on and on and on like a broken record. So we need to get rid of that over talkativeness, the wandering mind, the monkey, intoxicated monkey in our left hemisphere, and calm it down to a reasonable speak when you want to, when you mean something, when you want something, when you want to convey something, communicate something. Otherwise, there is no need to talk. When you go for nature walk or when you see the sunset, there is no need to keep talking about it. When you keep talking, you miss the sunset, you miss the bird, you miss the deer. So please learn to stay quiet and calm. One of the best advice that Raman Maharshi gave is stay quiet, learn to be quiet, still, silent, and serene. That is a great advice. And then you can reach the deeper levels of your own being. And then you can experience what it is like to be still, silent, and serene, and peaceful, and profoundly insightful, profoundly creative. Wilder Penfield was the one who inspired me to go into neurosurgery, then neurophysiology, and then neurology. Wilder Penfield was a neurosurgeon from Montreal Neurological Institute, Canada. One of, one of his profound idea was what he called the centroencephalic integrative system, in which he proposed, he used to stimulate different areas of the brain in a fully conscious epileptic patient and evoke different responses, like a movement of the right hand or left foot, or if you are speaking, you could stop speaking or listening, and he could stimulate certain areas of what he called the interpretive cortex, where you could recall the whole event. For instance, this event that I'm speaking to you on this Zoom meeting, this whole event could be recalled or replayed in my brain by stimulating certain areas of the interpretive cortex. So he showed that. But what he said, that the really source of our mind, the source of our being, is not in the cortex, but is in the upper part of the brainstem, which is in the mesencephalon and diencephalon, this region of the brain, and from which both the cortical hemispheres are activated. Also, the spinal cord and the whole body is activated. Basically, the hemispheres control the opposite side of the body and the environment, but the overall locomotion or the holistic being or the the bilateral motor control is in the upper brainstem. It is called the mesodiencephalon or dimencephalon, which is a very, very interesting idea. This next cartoon, he said, this was before his death, Wilder Penfield. Throughout his life, he tried to explain mind in terms of brain and brain neurophysiology, electrophysiology. But toward the end of his life, he still couldn't figure out how such a complex mind could be generated from this stream of electrical impulses in the brainstem, in the centroencephalic system. So that was still a puzzle for him. So this is his diagram in which he shows this is the person, this is the brainstem, the centroencephalic system. But he showed the nous, which is mind, outside. And there is an interaction between an outside mind and the energy of the brain from centroencephalic system. So to some extent, he took a dualistic perspective, but at the same time, he believed the energy from the mind came from the brainstem centroencephalic integrative system, which is fascinating. In our literature, of course, we call it the pilot flame of the self-effulgent conscious arousal, awareness, and being. This idea now has been extended to what is called the extended reticular activating system, in which we not only include the reticular formation in the brainstem, but also the intrathalamic nuclei and the medial part of the cerebral cortex, the midline cortex. So this idea is still valid. And this article by LeBlanc, published just last year in 2019, is a fascinating review of the history of Penfield's legacy. I have great respect for him. Other thing is that we need to experience this ground self or the original self, original being. And then everything else is projected from that. That I call the proji self. Proji self A, proji self B, proji self C, or attentional vector A, attentional vector B, C. So we get involved in different activities like speaking, singing, walking, doing, sleeping, whatever the action is. So all these are projections from that original ground, from original state of energy, awareness, being. These are the networks that are involved in respiration, in wakeful state, and sleep state. Now, the description of non-dual awareness in the Western literature, in the neuroscience literature, was came first, I think, by Josipovich in 2019. And he showed 10 different criteria of non-dual awareness. Remember, non-dual awareness was described in Mandukya Upanishad, I showed you earlier. as the Turiya or the fourth state of consciousness, Atman, Brahman. But Josipovich talks about presence or being. Of course, fortunately, Josipovich acknowledges the contribution of Buddhism as well as Advaita Vedanta, which is nice. So, first is presence or being, sense of being. I exist, I am, is a fundamental fact. Then, sense of emptiness, that there is nothing going on in my mind. There are no thoughts, no emotions. Still, it is an infinite space, profound energy, unlimited energy. There is no imaging or symbolism or representation of that state. There is a certain luminosity or radiance of that. There is sense of bliss, non-duality. There is no other. As Raman Maharshi said, there is no other. He lived in that state of oneness, that non-duality, that infinite awareness, unity. It is continuous or timeless, ever present, ever fresh. And there is a sense of self in the sense self as aware presence, singular, continuous. This is not a self in the usual sense of constructed self. Yet non dual awareness is not someone else's awareness or an object fundamentally different from oneself. Rather, it is who one is and has always been as the conscious presence in all of our experiences and intrinsic reflexive knowing. I mean, that is who I am since I have been asking this question 60 years ago that I want to meet myself. So I am that, what I have always been. I am that. And still, I'm ever fresh, ever new. So there is no beginning and end. That is the beauty of it. It is so dynamic, so amazing once you realize the dynamism of it, the wonder of it, the mystery of it. This is the description in Turiya City in Mandukya Upanishad. When I came to London in January 9th, 1967, one book that I brought with me from my father's library was Mandukya Upanishad. And Mandukya Upanishad has 12 mantras or 12 verses. And I used to recite those 12 mantras by heart. And in that, it describes this final, original ground of our own being. It says it is not that which is conscious, uh, the internal subjective world, nor that which is conscious of the external world, nor that which is conscious of both, nor that which is the mass of consciousness, nor that which is simple consciousness, nor is it unconsciousness. It is unseen by any sense organ, beyond empirical dealings, incomprehensible by the mind, uninferable, unthinkable, indescribable, essentially by the self alone, negation of all phenomena, the peaceful, the auspicious, and the non dual. This is what is considered as the fourth state or Turiya. This is the Atman, and this is to be realized. These are profound insights. That's where these Upanishads are dated as old as 7 or 8,000 years old. So imagine this great insight that human beings have. And the same experience you can have today in your own being, innermost being, as Turiya, the fourth state of consciousness. I want to briefly tell you about one of my proposal was that this fourth state of consciousness is really the non-REM wake state or Turiya. It has non-wandering mind, minimal or no conscious contents or thoughts, memories, imaginations, and provoked feelings. There is spontaneous homeostatic feeling of blissful wellness and non-dual awareness. One is at ease with oneself and at home in the natural reality. It is a self-immersed existential primal experience. Now, interestingly, some of the modern research has shown that in non-REM sleep, which is dreamless sleep, there is synaptic remodeling. There is reorganization of the brain, the electrochemistry of the brain. All the negative molecules like catecholamines, adrenaline, norepinephrine, cortisol, all those are metabolized. And the chemistry of the brain sort of brought back to normal. And the memories, conflicting memories are adapted or resolved, and there is synaptic remodeling and refreshing with consolidation of adaptive memories and skills. That's how we learn. And the subconscious conflicts are resolved. Sometimes they are not resolved. And if they are not resolved, then you keep dreaming, having nightmares, waking up, micro arousals. This is the dream state. And in dream imagery, of course, you get a lot of hints about what's going on in your mind, in this so called subconscious mind or unconscious mind, which Freud was very devoted to and studied a lot and contributed a lot. And the REM wake state is like the wandering mind, which most of us live in, with the constant duality, talkativeness. One of the name of modern man is Homo loquens, the talkative man. But now we need to discover Homo equanimitas, the peaceful man, the man with equanimity. There are two process models of sleep and wake, the circadian and homeostatic. The circadian process is during the day, the sun, and then it slowly goes down. And the homeostatic sleep drive comes down and then goes up. There is a combination of homeostatic and circadian signals throughout the day. And our state of awakeness or asleep, drowsiness, depends on these two processes. We have a conscious arousal energy matrix from which emerges awareness, from which emerges attention. And then attention creates the duality of subject and object, the player and the play. And from that, with its memory and recall, we develop mind, mentation, thinking, dreaming, ego affect, and cognition, etc. Some of the quantum physicists are coming into neuroscience, and they try to express it. Of course, one of their big puzzle is what the observer variables. The variables that are very hard to define depends on the observer, because it is the state and the expectation of observer that kind of defines what happens in a particular event, particular thing. But anyway, in this paper by Northrop, he talks about neuromental transformation of time and space from neural activity to mental features, from the resting time space to the brain-mind connection. So what he talks about, it is the resting state of the brain and mind that gets transformed into some mental activity, conscious activity. And then we have some experience or content of experience. So you can look at the experience and the experiencer as the container view, like something is in my mind, that I am the container and some events are the contents in my mind. Other way to look at it is construction view, in which I am the one who is creating this model of my mind and modifying it, changing it, constructing it. I act on it, get a feedback, adjust my model, and act again. So this is the construction view, and it's an evolving process of experience. Current theory in neuroscience is about the synergistic global workspace. Consciousness is like a holistic global workspace. in which ignitions of conscious perceptual insights occur, which are then broadcasted to the rest of the nervous system. This is, for instance, the external environment, which sends signals to specialized modules, perception, which is then integrated in the brain, in the synergistic global workspace, and then it is broadcasted and acted on the environment. In Vedic literature, Akashavat Anantoham Ghatavat Prakrutam Jagat. King Janaka said that I am like the infinite sky, and what I phenomenal experience that I have is like the content of that, small parts or objects. This is Parijatak from our garden. Lucky to have Parijatak. What is meditation? Meditation is really normalizing your own mind, reducing all the wandering, all the conflicts, all the stress, the tension, anxiety, worries, depression, all that, and come to your ground level, to your natural bliss. One of the simplest technique of meditation is to breathe out and smile and let go of everything. Kinara chhod do, let go. Meditation is returning to or merging into the refreshing, restful, serene, and infinite foundation within, where to discover that inner foundation, inner fountain of energy awareness being. Self integration and immersion are the keys to pristine, insightful, and creative meta awareness. It is intrinsic self freedom and natural bliss. It is the pristine, conscious life itself. It is a way of living. It's not just sitting with eyes closed. It is the way you live from moment to moment. Sitting with eyes closed is essential in the beginning to minimize the wandering mind and the noise in your head and the mind. But once you learn to be still, silent, and serene and peaceful, then it becomes a way of living from moment to moment throughout. This is from neuroscience, contents of consciousness. MW is mind wandering. These little objects, visual, auditory, and somatic experiences or events, our mind is crowded. There is hardly any space anywhere, confused. And then open monitoring. Open monitoring means you develop an awareness of what is going on. When you become aware of your wandering mind, it calms down a little. It becomes a little quiet and you start seeing objects. There is a certain order in it. And then in focus attention, FA, you focus on one event, one object. It may be the simple noticing your breath, activity of breath, or it may be some object or name or mantra or image or whatever it is. But awareness of breath is the simplest because it's always there with you. And once you are good at it, you just become aware of breath itself and nothing else. There are no thoughts, no emotions, no memories, nothing else is going on. And then the breathing also slows down. It becomes slow, deep breathing. And the slow, deep breathing is very physiological. It is very helpful. It heals a lot. I'll come to that. Slow, deep breathing is about 6 breaths per minute, which is about zero point 0.1 hertz. Now, one of the new idea in neuroscience is extended autonomic system, including sympathetic, parasympathetic, neuroendocrine, and neuroimmunological components. So there is catecholamines, glucocorticoids, but there is peripheral adaptation as well as behavioral adaptation. In meditative process, for instance, you are focusing attention on breath, Then there are some distractions, spontaneous thought, and then meta-awareness of ongoing distraction or thoughts, and then reorientation of attention back to breath awareness. So this process goes on and on till you become really good at it and it becomes effortless. This is the thing. In mindfulness meditation, for instance, you have attention control, emotion regulation, self-awareness. In the early stage, there is effortful doing. You need to put in effort to become quiet and peaceful, calm, composed. In the middle stage, you have effort to reduce the mind wandering. And in the advanced stage, it becomes effortless. It becomes your second nature. This is a functional MRI that shows the difference between mind wandering without meta-awareness and mind wandering with meta-awareness. You can see how with meta-awareness, the chaotic activity, the hyperactivity in the brain is reduced. Brain has become calm and quiet and more orderly, alert and relaxed. Shanta udita, that means calm and quiet and alert. Facial expressions can be positive and negative. And of course, negative expressions have profound effect. Anger, fear, sadness, happiness, all these facial expressions have effects on others as well as on ourselves. And some of the circuits have been defined for each emotion. I'm not showing it my selfie as, as my own. I'm not bragging about myself, but I want to share this moment when I was very happy subjectively. I was at a gulmore tree and I was naturally peaceful, quiet, silent. There were no thoughts, no intentions, no conflicts, no stress, nothing. So I took a selfie, and you can notice that the smile is symmetrical, the eyelids are symmetrical, face is symmetrical, there are no wrinkles on the forehead, and the breathing was symmetrical or sushumna. Interestingly, there is a yoga called Hasya Yoga. Hasya Yoga means you intentionally laugh, and that laughter itself modifies your brain and mind and relaxes you and brings to a so-called normal peaceful state. And there is some truth in it that the same circuit, voluntary as well as involuntary laughter circuit, can be now electrically stimulated by intracranial EEG electrodes, and the person will get into laughter whether he wants to do it or not. Because this laughter circuit can be stimulated electrically, and you can define the laughter circuit in the pons, midbrain, subcortex, nucleus accumbens. So there is some truth in Hasya Yoga that you breathe out and laugh or smile, and that will normalize your stressed out or agitated mental state. Finally, of course, we have the survival instinct. This mouse, for instance, when he notices the eagle up in the sky, it's an instantaneous response. That notice of the eye of the eagle goes to the superior colliculus, periaquedural gray, and that immediate fight or flight response. Of course, here there is no question of fight. There is just a question of flight and hiding somewhere. Otherwise, it's a matter of life and death. Other new idea in consciousness research is that every animal has different capacities for consciousness in terms of ability for sensory perception, olfaction, touch, vision. Eagle has tremendous vision. A dog has far better sense of smell than human beings have. So we have a different profile of conscious processing. Each animal has a different profile for conscious processing. This is just a way to show that there is egocentric and allocentric growth and development of sense of self from birth all the way to 48 months. And we go through different stages. Damasio has described proto-self, core self, and autobiographical self. It is a similar idea. When we develop I, me, and mine, and my world sense. Now, conscious decision making is instantaneous, but there is a lot of background that goes into it. And this region of the brain, called the cingulate gyrus, anterior, middle, and the posterior, anterior cingulate gyrus gets a lot of input about how to respond, what to do, what's happening, self-monitoring, environmental monitoring. The posterior cingulate gyrus receives a lot of input about the sensory perception, the autobiographical input, the context, and the middle cingulate where the decision is made, emotional decision is made, which is then transmitted to the premotor area and the action is executed. In the executive cortex, frontal lobe, there is working memory, inhibitory control, and reasoning. But this gets into too many details. I can't go into too many details. There is a certain hierarchy in the frontal lobe. All this is frontal lobe. The basic is sensory motor response, sensory motor control. Second is contextual control. What happened before has an influence on what I am going to do next. And then schematic control, in which you have some sort of long-term goal to achieve something, some purpose, goal, or meaning in your life, by which you plan your actions, plan your behavior. This parietal lobe area is the region in which there is integration between self and the other, how we interact with someone else. So we create an image of ourselves playing that role and an image of the other who is the object. And there is an interaction that occurs between these two in this oval area, Wernicke's area, angular gyrus, supramarginal gyrus, and the superior temporal gyrus. Fascinating research in this area. I won't go into too many details, but this is the speech circuit, cortical speech processing, in which there is Broca's area and then Wernicke's area. So there is a continuous circuit that goes on in speaking, especially in the dominant hemisphere, the left hemisphere. This diagram is about the hippocampal memory network. Hippocampus is a crucial structure for memory, and it is connected to all other structures like amygdala, insular cortex, anterior cingulate cortex. I can't go into too many details of that. Now, in slow deep breathing, I want to make this point that in slow deep breathing, there is enhancement of attention by stimulation of the locus coeruleus. There is relaxation by inhibition of amygdala, and there is consolidation of memory by stimulation of the hippocampus. So slow deep breathing is inducive for meditative state. This is an interesting slide in which some of the patients who are undergoing surgery for epilepsy had monitoring of their intracranial EEG activity with these intracranial EEG electrodes, with each point being a point of contact for electrical activity. And they monitor the electrical activity from all different areas of the brain. And what they found that the breathing modulates many areas of the brain. And so breathing is almost like an overall organizing principle of the brain functioning. That's why it is very valuable to understand the practice of pranayama and its effect on different areas of the brain. This is another interesting thing. Being in nature itself has profound effect. This is a study from Stanford University in which a group of students went for a walk in nature and a comparable group of students went for a walk in downtown area. And each group was told to take 10 photographs of whatever they liked or they were interested in. Interestingly, the group of meditation or the nature walkers had much less um, chaotic activity in the anterior cingulate cortex, which is always on the alert, always watching, vigilant, hyper vigilant. On the other hand, the people in urban area were hyper vigilant. So nature walk is a kind of meditation, which is very natural and beautiful. In my book, I try to show that we need to develop an ecosystemic perspective, not just the bodily perspective or the mind perspective, but the ecosystemic perspective that we are embedded in nature. And this sense of unity has 4 stages. The first stage is what is called being in the same existential field, salokya. Second is being closest to one's essential being, samipya. Being of the same form or essence, sarupya. And being united with the energy being itself, which is sayujya, which is the yoga sthiti. This concept of fullness and emptiness, or purnata and shunyata. In Buddhism, shunyata is emphasized. In Vedanta and yoga, purnata is emphasized. But these are 2 sides of the same coin. And these are 2 of my drawings, just thinking about it, or just came to my mind, so I drew it. But we have to understand the spontaneous self-effulgence and the conscious mental life is still a great mystery. There is a whole philosophy of holism that is coming in, especially in nursing literature and medical literature also. This is one of the theoretical perspectives of holistic health. Entities and systems in the universe exist as unified wholes. Parts of the whole are dynamically interdependent and interrelated. The whole cannot be understood by isolated examination of parts, and the whole is greater than the sum of parts. These are great statements and truths. One other view, one of the revealing statement is that our basis is molecular. There is an ocean of molecules from which different assemblies emerge, cells emerge, life emerges. And this holistic perspective has been dominant in Advaita Vedanta as well as Taoism. One new idea in quantum physics is that it is like an emergence of one electromagnetic field from another electromagnetic field. It is like a field within field. In this internal physical space-time, operational space-time, and phenomenal space-time. This is a very interesting article. So looking at the whole existence as quantum electromolecular field within field, and the individual organism being a field within the bigger field or the greater field of nature. And this is exactly what I express in my article on embodied cognitive system with exchange of energy, matter, and information. The idea of a the whole ecosystem, cosmic ecosystem as a cosmic egg, is expressed in Vedanta, in Vedas, which is a similar idea. This is another of my painting. It is based on a cut section of a red cabbage. But the idea was simple. It's just an abstract painting that I did and called it Cosmic Egg. Some of my journal entries, the 5S of self: still, silent, serene, spontaneous, sense of smell, sense of self, smile. Then we define and redefine ourselves. For instance, Purnoham, that I am complete, full. Ekoham, I am one. Sarvoham, I am all this. Shantoham, I am peaceful, quiet, serene. Soham, I am that, I am he. Or Shunyoham, that I am no one in particular. I am nobody in specifically. So there is this constant circularity between dual and non-dual. Duality is self as subject, self as object, and non-dual, of course, is the self-sentient, primal, self-effulgent being within ourselves. This was one experience just that happened recently, November 25th, 2020. Wholehearted conscious living. I woke up naturally, fully refreshed and alert, completely quiet and silent. No speech, words, no thoughts, no voice, no face, no other, no memories, no needs or worries, nor expectations, no sense of achievement or ego, no subconscious suggestions, no will, goal, or direction. All was perfect in itself naturally. It was bliss. No time or direction, no need to count or describe, but just to write down what is happening endlessly. It was an incessant, ever fresh, yet the same self aware, timeless being. This moment is perfect. Be present wholeheartedly. This I wrote in 1980 journal. This is a poem, short poem called, I'm going to share 2 or 3 poems, including one in Marathi, and then end the talk. Holistic existence in nature. I exist in nature, I exist in reality. Every breath or move breaks its stillness. Every sound or word breaks its silence. Every form or image breaks its space. Just by staying still, quiet, silent, and serene, one finds oneself immersed in reality. Reality is everywhere all the time. It is self sentient, self powered, and self effulgent. It is filled with beauty, goodness, peace, and bliss. It is a blessing to be immersed in reality. It is a holistic existence and experience. Transparent life. I borrowed a lungful of air and gave it back to the atmosphere. I borrowed a mouthful of water and gave it back to the ocean. I borrowed a stomachful of food and gave it back to the earth. I borrowed an eyeful of light and gave it back to the sun. I borrowed a nestful of space and gave it back to the sky. I cannot borrow time, as past and future are only self creations. So here I am now, fully immersed happily in the beloved present. It has all that is needed for a blissful, curious, creative, and transparent life that is ever so fresh and effortless. Nature is my best school to achieve insight and equanimity. It is my temple. The sacred is everywhere all the time. Individuality with self autonomy and universality with natural order change spontaneously and non linearly. Appreciate this truth, refresh yourself and your mindset, and rejoice in the life in nature. Be at ease with yourself and at home in the world. Appreciate nature's beauty, bliss, and bounty. Life in nature is an awesome experience and mystery. Now, I want to share this Marathi poem because a lot of the audience is Marathi. कवितेचं नाव आहे कोण जाणे. There is also English translation for people who can follow it in English. कोण जाणे. एका वेळी एक जण येतो, कुठून कोण जाणे. एका वेळी एक जण जातो, कुठे कोण जाणे. एका वेळी मी पण जाणार, कधी कोण जाणे. आयुष्याचं राहटगाडगं चाललं, चालतं कसं कोण जाणे. चालता येतं तोपर्यंत चालावं, बोलता येतं तोपर्यंत बोलावं, पण हे शरीर कसं चालतं बोलतं हे कुणास ठाऊक. श्रद्धेने तात्पुरतं सांत्वन होतं, पण या प्रश्नांची उत्तरं कोण देणार. कापूर पटकन पेटतो आणि लवकर विझून जातो, मध्ये भरपूर उजेड देतो. माणसाचं सारं जीवन असंच आहे, क्षणभंगूर, विद्युल्लतासारखं. ईश्वराची कृपा म्हणावी तर ती असेल आनंदी स्वभावात, शुद्ध मनात आणि प्रेमळपणात. Thank you. I want to thank you for your patience and attention. I especially want to thank Rajini Zogrekar, Aniruddha Bhakre, and Ramesh Deshpande for inviting me and working with me for this talk. Thank you so much.
Hello, Rajni. Hello.
Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Deshmukh. I think he deserves so much appreciation. This holistic existence and experience, I think that is the message and one has to share. So I think let us open up these questions for question.
Okay.
Rajani, have you noted or can I start?
Please start.
Okay. See, Govind Modi has some interesting questions. Govind, hello. You had some interesting questions. Can you raise them?
या मी सांगू शकतो. डॉक्टर देशमुख अप्रतिम लेक्चर आहे आणि पहिलं तुम्ही सुरुवात केली की माझी सुरुवात अशी झाली की मी कोण आहे आणि मग त्यानंतर स्टेप बाय स्टेप तुम्ही खूप अभ्यास केला, पुस्तकं लिहिले, सगळं केलं, न्यूरोसायन्स मध्ये गेले आणि कम्प्लीट न्यूरोसायन्सचं म्हणजे अगदी चिकाटीनं हे सगळं करून कथ्याकूट काढलाय. तर माझा हा प्रश्न आहे की तुम्हाला शेवटी हे करत असताना कधी रिअलायझेशन झालं किंवा तुम्ही स्वतःला कधी जाणलं, म्हणजे थोडक्यात इंट्रोस्पेक्शन म्हणा किंवा क्रिटिकल सेल्फ अनालिसिस म्हणा, आणि तुम्हाला कळालं की दिस इज व्हॉट डॉक्टर देशमुख इज. आणि त्यानंतर जेव्हा तुम्हाला ते रिअलायझेशन झालं त्यानंतर तुमच्या आयुष्यात काय बदल घडले की जे आमच्यासारख्या लोकांना माहिती पाहिजे की हे होऊ शकतं, हे पॉसिबल आहे आयुष्यात.
Well, it's a living process. It's hard to define one particular moment. जसा आंबा पिकतो, तुम्हाला एका क्षणी असं म्हणता येत नाही की आता आंबा पिकला आणि आता आंबा खराब झालाय. It's a slow, gradual process. It's a process of growth and development. At the same time, the realization is instantaneous. It is absolutely, it just dawns on you. Sometimes I just wake up with that feeling. I wake up with the idea, wake up with that understanding. Sometimes I wake up with 2 or 3 poems and I just write it down one after the other. So some process is instantaneous and some process is gradual maturation. Just like the flower blossoms or the mango becomes ripe. So both these aspects are there. And the funny thing is there is no memory of it. If it is a memory, then that's not the state. You are not there. That is just the word. That is just the memory. We are back to your thinking. So the original ground is from moment to moment, very fresh. So you cannot say that I was enlightened at this day and time or I wasn't enlightened at this time. That's too crude way to look at it. So, but you can see that you can infer some of the things based on the expression, the poem that came out, the journal entries that came out, the books that came out. So it slowly expresses itself in its own ways. And I hope, I'm not trying to claim anything. I'm not trying to claim that I'm enlightened or anything like that. I'm a simple, ordinary man, sadha manus hai kedatla. But I had great curiosity to know myself. I had a good, solid foundation in my family of Vedanta, Upanishad, Yoga, and with intense desire to learn neuroscience and understand brain and mind and consciousness and self, I think I've come to a certain level of understanding in both yoga as well as neuroscience, which I'm trying to express myself as well as I can, is something that cannot be described or expressed fully, completely, as we all know. Thank you.
त्याचं